All right, good morning, Maseches Yevamos. We're learning Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis and Daf Kuf Gimel, and we're starting 2/3 of the way down, maybe 3/4 of the way down at the two dots on Kuf Beis Amud Aleph, starting with the words Simin, Hataras Yevamos Sandal. Simin, just a mnemonic for us to remember, to think about the upcoming three discussions about Hatara, which we'll learn about in a minute, Yevama and Sandal. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rab is of the opinion that hitarta Yevama l'shuk b'shmitas rov ha'ekev, that a man who removes part of his shoe, we'll see really if it's a man, but the removal of part of the shoe, if the majority of the heel of the ekev is revealed in chalitza, so then this woman is now able to marry anyone she wants. Meisve, the Gemara asks a question, and that word here says hutru, it actually should be hitir. Hitir ritzuos min al the sandal. Let's say that the man himself unties the shoe, his shoes that he's wearing, o sheshamat rov haregel, or that he was the one who slid the shoe off of most of his ankle, chalitza psula. This is a question of technical thresholds. Who has to do what? Does she have to remove the full shoe? Can he remove part of the shoe? Can he untie the shoe? What is going on here? So says the Gemara, time of the shamadhu, hashamadhi chalitza sakshera. The reason in this Mishnah that we just learned, as in this Tosefta actually, as to why it is that it's not kosher is because he is the one who did some of the work. But hashamadhi, if she would have done it, then the chalitza would have been kshera, and then she would be free to marry anyone she wants. What about the concept of rov haregel in, rov ha'ekev lo? It said over here in this Tosefta a couple lines ago, rov haregel. So that means off of the leg, like off of the calf, not just the foot itself. So it says the Gemara, is that not true about the heel itself too? It says the Gemara, lo, that's not correct. Really, those two terms are the same. Hainu rov haregel, hainu rov ha'ekev. When we talk about regel and ekev, we're really talking about the same thing, and we're saying most of the foot. Why did we call it regel? Because because basically the leg bone is connected to the ankle bone, and everything is one. I was going to sing it, but it's not necessary. You get the point, is that they're all connected, and we just refer to the whole bottom part of the foot as the leg. And Mesaila the Rabbi Yanai, this idea is actually supported, and it seems to support Rabbi Yanai. De Amar Rabbi Yanai, ben shehitir hu v'shamtahi, whether or not he untied the shoe and she removed it, or the reverse, ben shehitira he, maybe she untied the shoe v'shamat and he removed it, chalitza psula. The only way that chalitza works in technical terms is if she does all the work. She has to be the one to untie the shoe. She has to be the one to take off the shoe. We'll actually read a little bit later in the Gemara today that he has to keep his foot on the ground. She has to lift up his foot, because if he picks up his foot, maybe the shoe would partially fall off because he picked up his foot, and therefore maybe that's considered him doing the work and not her. She has to be the one to do the work. By Rav Yanai asks, Kira'asu mahu, or Seraftehu mahu, if the shoe tears and falls off, or if it's burned off, what would the halacha be? Would we say that that's chalitza? Here, what we're discussing is the following classic chakira. Do we say, Galui kara ba'inan v'ha'ika, that we need the foot to be revealed, and whether or not the shoe is torn or burnt off or taken off, now the foot is revealed. O dilma, or perhaps do we say chalitza ba'inan v'leka? Or do we say that no, it's not just that the foot needs to be revealed, it's that the activity of chalitza needs to take place. We don't know the answer to that question. Next, connected. Ba'aminei Rav Nechemya me Rabba. If a person's wearing shnei min alim, ze al gab, ze mahu, a person's wearing multiple shoes, what is this? I just picture sometimes children in a house will walk around in their shoes, in their parents' shoes. So sometimes you'll see things like that. Well, let's say an adult is doing something like that. Obviously, our shoes are not made to be worn one into the other, but let's say Neos, those boots that you wear in the winter, they're slip overs, or the rubbers that we wear over our shoes. Would that be considered? If a person's wearing those shoes as it relates to chalitza, what would the halacha be? Says the Gemara, what's the mitzvah? Hey chidami. We're 4 lines from the bottom, Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. If you took off the outer shoe and left on the inner shoe, well, that doesn't work. Yes, you need to take off the shoe from your foot, but not the thing that's on the shoe that's on your foot. That's too many levels away. It has to be removal from the foot itself. Says the Gemara, Lo tzricha. What's the actual case we're discussing here? You tore the outer shoe and removed the inner shoe. But when you tore the outer outer shoe, it was still attached to the foot somehow. What's the halacha? Do we say chalitza ba'inan v'ha'ika, that you did chalitza, granted you took off the inner shoe after tearing the outer shoe, or odilma gliyei kara ba'inan v'leka, or no, you need the foot to be revealed, but now the outer shoe is still kind of stuck on the foot, and therefore you don't have a gilui kara, your foot's not revealed. And we would answer the same way with a teka, we don't know. And turning to the top of Kuf Beis Amud Beis, the Gemara asks, Umi ika ki hagavna, is there even such a metzias as wearing multiple shoes? Says the Gemara, yes, there is. The Rabbanan saw Rabbi Yehuda go out into the marketplace with 5 soft shoes. It's kind of like thick socks, something along those lines that he would wear, and they saw that. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, fascinating question. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marab. Yevamos shehigdila bein ha'achin. Let's say that Reuven's married to Rachel, and Reuven dies. And Rachel lives in the house with all of Reuven's brothers, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, everybody, the whole Gans Mishpacha. No yichud issues, let's put all of those aside. She lives in the same house as the brothers who she could potentially marry as a Yevama. Now, what's the halacha if she lives in that house? We do allow her at any point that she wants, and at any point that the future husband wants to marry her. We don't have to worry if maybe she actually took off one of their shoes and did chalitza by accident. That we don't worry about. Taima de lo chazinan. The reason why we're not concerned is because we never saw her taking off any of their shoes. But ha-chazinan, if in fact we did see her take off the shoes, chayshinan, and Rashi adds in what is necessary to understand this Gemara on the second line of Rashi. Maybe it really was chalitza when he came home, when, let's say, Shimon, Reuven's brother, Reuven died, and Rachel lives in the house, and Shimon's sitting on the couch, and she offers, oh, can I take off your shoes for you? And she takes off this shoe, leposla alei, and Rashi says, it's mitzvah. She didn't want to do the chalitza for the sake of mitzvah, she was helping him. But does the activity of chalitza without kavanah work?
Don't you need eating or basting?
You assume there was bezdin. You need bezdin, absolutely. Let's assume there was a bezdin sitting there. It's a theoretical scenario. It's a theoretical scenario. So then the Gemara says it seems to be that had we seen her take off one of their shoes, we would be concerned. Tanya, hold on, that can't be. Just because you see someone take off the shoe doesn't mean that it's actual chalitza. If only one of them had intentions, then chalitza subsula she's kavna shem kechad. Everybody has to have kavanah. So it can't just be that she's taking off his winter shoes and all of a sudden there's chalitza and then she can't marry him anymore. That's crazy. Says the Gemara, you're right. Hachi kamar. Afal gav de chazinan ein choshishin shema kivnu. Even if we see that Rachel took off Shimon's shoe or Levi's shoe, it doesn't matter. We are not concerned that was considered chalitza. She's still eligible to marry those people. Some say the exact opposite. Taima de lo chazinan. The reason why we aren't concerned is because we never saw her take off the shoes. But hachazinan choshishin. But if in fact we do have a sighting of her removing the shoe of Shimon, then we are concerned. What about the kavana? With the katana by kavana, what about the din, the brisa that we just saw a few lines ago, that you do need kavana when doing chalitza? The Gemara says, Hani alma, that you're right, that you need kavana in order to say that she can marry someone else, but to complicate whether or not she can marry the brothers, aval le'achen mifsala. So it's kind of like twilight a little bit. On the one hand, the removal of the shoe is enough to create a concern with the brother, but it's not enough to free her to the masses. In order to free her to the masses, she needs to do a chalitza. They need to do a chalitza with kavana. Good. Third line, we're in the third comment in a row from Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. We're about a quarter of the way down on Kuf Beis and Amud Beis, a lot of ground to cover, and Shachar says in 25 minutes for some of us. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marab. Sandal atafur b'pishtan. Let's say that the person has a shoe, but it's not made out of animal materials. It's made out of pishtan. It's made out of flax. Says the Gemara, ein choltzin bo. That is an ineligible shoe as it relates to the mitzvah of chalitza, shnei emar, because as the pasuk reads, where does the pasuk read? The pasuk says, "V'en alech tachash." You should be wearing shoes made out of tachash, which are animal hides. Ve'ema tachash in midiachrin alo. Maybe we should say it's only this particular animal of the tachash, but not every animal. Says the Gemara, no'al riba, any type of animal product. Well, no'al riba. If you're saying that we have the word no'al twice to include other materials, afilu kol milinami. Maybe we should even say pishtan. Why do we exclude things that are not made out of animal hides? Im kain tachash. What was the point of the pasuk saying tachash at all? Obviously, it has to be animal hides, but no'al riba teaches us that it has to be any type of leather. That's fine. Could be alligator shoe. It doesn't matter as long as they're made out of animal parts. It's kosher. Who shall or? Let's say the base of the shoe is made out of leather. Vitrisiyosav shall seyar mahu. And the straps of the shoe are made out of hair from an animal, like let's say the horsehair of an animal. Says the Gemara, Amarle, Milo Karina be that's still considered an animal part, no problem at all. So the Gemara takes this to the next logical conclusion. Halfway down on Kuf Beis and Beis, maybe we should say Kulo shall say Nami. Let's say we had a shoe that was made out of all of the threads of horsehair, whatever it is. Maybe we should say that's good enough for chalitza. Says the Gemara, not correct. Hahu karka mikri. That's a different type of shoe called the karka, and that's actually not called an animal shoe, even though it's made out of animal product. We need the shoe to be made out of leather. The shoe has to be made out of leather. Me'al raglo, when the pasuk says that they have to remove the shoe from one's foot, how do we know that it's mishlafu, that it's actually removal? Maybe we should say that it's not removal, but it's actually putting on the shoe for chalitza. Let's see what we're talking about. How do we know that we assume that the word is mishlaf, that it's removal? That when a house has tzaras, what do we do? What do? We remove the stones. Therefore, over here, when we say chalitza, it means to remove the shoe. Ve'ema, maybe I could argue, says the Gemara, Zeruzehi, that it's actually the removal of the shoe. Dichsiv, because we have in another part, not the Ve'ema Zeruzehi, that it means putting on the shoe. Dichsiv, Heichaltzu, me'itchem anashim letzava. What does it mean in this case? Heichaltzu means to prepare people for army. When you prepare people for army, you get them dressed in army clothes. And maybe we should assume that chalitza in our case is like this chalitza of Heichaltzu me'itchem anashim letzava, and therefore it means to put on the shoe, in the mitzvah of chalitza is to put on a shoe. Great question. Says the Gemara, no, hasam nami, there by that pasuk of Heichaltzu me'itchem anashim letzava, there too is shlufim mibesa lekrava. That's talking about removing someone from their house to go to battle, and therefore similar to the chalitza that we know of by the shoe is to take off the shoe and not to put it on. Ivaksiv, 3 lines before the wide lines, kuf beis mid beis, but the pasuk says yechaletz ani ba'anyo, that a person will be chalatz, he'll be supported as a poor person in his poverty. Therefore, we see chalatz is to support, and maybe we should therefore assume again is to put on the shoe. Says the Gemara, no, b'schar onyo yechaltzu midin shel gehenim. When a person lives in poverty, then they will be yechaltzu, they will be saved or removed from the punishment of Gehenim. Therefore, verifying what we already know, that really chalitza means to remove. Ella, says the Gemara, saying that the Kadosh Baruch Hu will support the Jews by surrounding them. Says the Gemara, it doesn't mean support in this case either. Because they fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then yechaltze medina shel Gehenim. So we see here as well that it means to remove, that because they fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yirah Shamayim is going to help us to be nitzal from the din of Gehenim. That we have a pasuk that speaks about the bones becoming chalitz. And what does it mean that the bones become chalitz? Does it mean removed or does it mean support? This is a beautiful bracha. It's strengthening the bones, which again seems to be that we're talking about something supportive and something strengthening, implying that maybe the word chalatz means to put the shoe on and not off. Says the Gemara, look, you've quoted a lot of psukim in. You're absolutely right. Mash mahachi mash mahachi. It seems that the word chalitza can be used in 2 ways. We're so used to hearing the word chalitza as it relates to the removal of the shoe, but the word chalitza could be both things. Says the Gemara, and I know this is true. In our case, if you assumed that what we were talking about is putting the shoe on, we should have said in the pasuk, put the shoe on his foot. The Gemara says, well, that's not so simple, because if you would have, if the pasuk only said biraglo, to try and teach us that we have to put the shoe on the leg, that's a problem, because it would have implied on the leg, yes, and on the thigh, no. Even on the thigh, it should be allowed. We'll see that this is not a simple assumption. If that's true, then the pasuk should have said from on his leg, my me'al raglo, shmami no, mishlaf shalif. It didn't say b'me'al raglo, it said me'al raglo, and therefore we know mishlaf shalif, and now we've defined the word cholitz. So the Gemara went through this back and forth. Is chalitza to remove a shoe or is chalitza to put on a shoe, based on various uses of the word chalitza in the psukim? And while the Gemara does acquiesce that there are different uses of the word of chalitza, but really we hold that it's mishlaf, that it's the removal of the shoe. That is the din. Says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. The Rabban Gamliel. There was a heretic that said to Rabban Gamliel, there's a people where their master has done chalitza to them. That a Kadosh Baruch Hu did chalitza to the Jewish people. Says the Gemara, Amar Le, Rabbi Gamliel says back to him, you are a shota. Miksiv chalatz lohem. It doesn't say that a Kadosh Baruch Hu did chalitza to them. It says chalatz mehem ksiv, that we walked away from them, not in the way that you're talking about chalitza. And also, says the Gemara, you got it backwards. The relationship is not that way. The relationship is that we would be the wife and a Kadosh Baruch Hu would be the husband. He can't do chalitza to us. If a man does chalitza to a woman, it's a 0. If there's a Yevama where the brothers did the chalitza to her, midi mishashi, it's a nothing. It's a nothing. And that brings us to the 2 dots, 3/4 of the way down. To return to a conversation in the Mishnah about inpalya. We'd said in our Mishnah, inpalya chalitza psula, and inpalya is kind of like a sock or like a thin materialed boot that kind of goes up higher on the calf. It seems to be that an anpilya, that this type of sock or thin boot is not considered a minal. Vitanya should be a correction of the Gemara. Vitanya nami. We have a brisa that says something similar. That ein hatorim, when a person is giving a truma, ein hatorim nichnas lo bepargod chapos. A person cannot go into the partitioned parts of the Beis Hamikdash chapos with these shoes on, because that have hems in them. The chapos is a garment that has hems, not shoes. And also as well below ba'anpilya, and you also cannot wear anpilya. We thought anpilya were shoes. But here the anpilya is put in the first category, and then look at the rest of the brisa. And what Rashi explains this, that when it says it's separating an anpilya from minal and sandal, which shows you that minal and sandal are shoes, but anpilya are not shoes. So that's source number 1, that seems to be that an anpilya is not a shoe. Or minhu, yet we see that when it comes to the halachos of Yom Kippurim, that an anpilya is a shoe. When it comes to these 3 types of shoes, now anpilya is included with the shoes. A person cannot wear these on if they're made out of leather. They cannot wear them on Yom Kippur. It's the Isser of Ni'ilas HaSandal. Amar Abaye lav dafka, because that case that was giving us a restriction about wearing in pilya on Yom Kippur is Amar Abaye the isbe kitite umishum tainug, where there we're talking about wearing something in the shoe that's very comfortable, and there's an isser tainug of wearing something on your feet that's comfortable. Amar le ravo mishum tainug below minal b'yom kippurim yasiri. Is that true? If a person's wearing something on their foot that's comfortable, Isser Tainug. Why is there an Isser Tainug? There's an Isser Ni'ilas HaSandal. What are you talking about? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Bar Rav Huna, Karach Sudra Akari V'Nafik. Rabbi Bar Rav Huna used to wrap something around his foot on Yom Kippur and walk around no problem at all. He just couldn't wear leather. That was the only restriction. Elama Rabba Lokasha, and this is going to carry the next many lines of the Gemara, Kan Be'an Pilya Shel Or, Kan Be'an Pilya Shel Beged. So this thin sock-like material or this thinner shoe, it depends. If it's made out of leather, then it has the status of a shoe, and if it's made out of cloth, then it doesn't have the status of a shoe. And this is logical. If you don't say that, if you don't make the distinction of anpilya shel or and anpilya shel beged, then we'll have another source that conflicts what we just learned. 5 lines from the bottom on Kuf Beis Mebez to Tanya, the Brisa writes, Lo yatayal adam bikurd kisin besoch beso. A person cannot wear something that is referred to as undershoes in their home. We're not going to focus on this right now. Let's learn the rest of the Brisa. Avam the tile hu ba'anpilin besoch beso. But we see you're allowed to wear anpilin even on Yom Kippur. Ella lab, it must be that shmamina kan be'anpilya shel or kan be'anpilya shel beged shmamina. That we have this distinction that there are anpilya shel or which are considered shoes, and we have anpilya shel beged which are not considered shoes. And in fact, Tanya Kavasi de Rava, we have a brisa that supports this distinction that Rava made, that there's a difference between anpilya shel or and anpilya shel beged. Now, this is a 2-part brisa, and what we'll see is in the beginning part of the brisa we refer to one type of anpilya shoes, and on the second part of the brisa we refer to a different type of anpilya shoes, highlighting Rava's distinction between the two. So 3 lines from the bottom: Chaltza b'minal hanifram shechofes rov hasandal rov haregel. If a person is wearing some type of shoe, it's a shoe that's lacking material, that's hanifram, like from lo sifrom, that the language of the psukim. If it's missing some material, but it still covers most of the regel, or the sandal hanifchash shemakabelas rov regel, or a sandal that's missing some of its materials that still covers most of the foot, or besandal shel sham b'shel siv, if you have a sandal that's made out of plant materials and not leather, or bekav hakita, a person's prosthetic leg, or b'mok, something made out of felt, or besmichas haraglaim, a blanket. This was actually a little pouch that people who had no legs would wear, because they didn't have wheelchairs back in the day, so they would wear this pouch like over the stumps of their legs, and they'd use their hands to move, and then this pouch that they would wear would prevent them from getting hurt. And anpilya shel or, if you had anpilya shel leather, which is the reference to Rava that we just saw, the choletzes, and the person doing chalitza is bein hagadol, top of Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, Bein Omed, Bein Yoshev, Bein Motze. The person doing the chalitza can either be standing or sitting or leaning over. V'choletzes min asuma. Anyone gets chalitza even from asuma. In all of these cases, chalitza sekshera. Now let's just remember what we're trying to do here. We're trying to highlight the sheet of Rava, that there's a difference between anpilya shel or and anpilya shel beged. And in this first part of the brisa, we saw anpilya shel or, and we saw that it's kshera. We therefore see anpilya shel or as a shoe. Then the Gemara continues with the second part of the brisa. Aval, the minal hanifram shein chofetz rova regel. If you have a minal that doesn't cover most of your foot, or or if you have a sandal that also doesn't have enough material to cover most of the foot of smichas hayadayim, or if you have something covering over your hands, uban pilya shel beged. Here's the second part of Rava referenced in the brisa. Or you have an anpilya, this type of sock or a light shoe that's made out of cloth and not leather. Or v'choletzas min hakatan chalitza sapsula. So we see in this brisa, black on white, the distinction that Rava made between anpilya shel or and anpilya shel beged. And anpilya shel or is considered a shoe, and anpilya shel beged is not. Says the Gemara, we referenced in this brisa, we're going to move on to a little bit of a side topic about a prosthetic. Kav hakitea, if you have the stump of a person's leg, money, whose shita is that? That's the shita of Rav Meir. Rav Meir, he did hakitea, yotze b'kav shelo on Shabbos. If a person has a prosthetic, my roommate in yeshiva had a prosthetic leg. He had bone cancer as a child, and his leg was amputated above the knee. And at the time, he had a very, very unique type of surgery, and they lengthened the stump of his leg by taking healthy bone from his calf after they amputated him and extended his femur bone a little bit longer to make the prosthetic a better fit. Fine. Every night he'd come back into the room and take off his leg and lean it up against the wall. Okay, so that was, he's a kav. He's a kitea. So hakitea yotze b'kav shelo. If a person has a prosthetic leg, he can walk with it on Shabbos. It's part of his body. What do we see from there? We see that it's a covering of the leg. It's a shoe, and that's why in the Reisha of the brisa at the bottom of the page it said b'kav hakitea that actually counts. Rabbi Yossi Oser, he disagrees. Ban pilya shel beged asa lerabanan, says the Gemara that when we talk about ban pilya shel beged in the seif of the brisa, that doesn't seem to be Rav Meir. That seems to be the shita of the Rabbanan. So therefore, Amar Abaye, there's two possible answers to this question. It can't be that the Mishnah is both Rav Meir and the Rabbanan. And Abaye says, "Mi the sefer Rabbanan Reishanami Rabbanan." We were wrong about the kav kitea. Really, it's not Rav Meir. The Reisha b'mechupa, or what we're talking about in the kav kitea is where the prosthetic of the person who was wearing the prosthetic was covered in leather, and because it was covered in leather, therefore it counts for chalitza. But in and of itself, it's not. So therefore, maybe the whole brisa is really the Rabbanan. Rava doesn't like that. Amar le Rava aval ein mechupa or mine. If it wouldn't be covered in leather puzzle, says the Gemara. Ihachi. If that's true, if that's your distinction, then adatani seifa ban pilya shel beged. Then when the seifa speaks about on pilya shel beged, lif log velisni b'dida, should have made the distinction right there in the brisa. Or puzzle. The Gemara should have distinguished in the brisa this distinction of covered in leather or not, and therefore Abaye's answer really isn't such a good answer. So Rava recommends his own. Elama Rava the Reisha Reb Meir, because the Reisha is Reb Meir when speaking about the kav kitea. That is the sheet of Reb Meir. Then Seifanami Reb Meir. The Seif is also Reb Meir. And Hai Magin, in regards to the case of the kav, in the reason why Reb Meir would be matir is because it's Magin. It protects the person's body from getting hurt. The Hai, but when it comes to then pilya lo Magin, when it's made out of a beged, it doesn't protect anything, and therefore he would say that it's also. And the din that I referenced before, we're a third of the way down. Amar Ameimar, he's going to talk about the need for the person who has chalitza being done to him to keep his foot on the ground. He needs to take his foot and keep it on the ground. Amar le Ravashi la Ameimar, but we learned it at the very, very top of this page, the top words, Vatanya ben Omed ben Yoshev ben Moteh. That the person having chalitza can stand up, he can be sitting down, and he could be moteh, he could be leaning, and there's somewhat of an implication that both feet don't have to be on the ground. Says the Gemara, it's not correct. Ema, really, really his feet do have to be on the ground. Amemar gives a halachic issue. We have some people who have some serious medical problems with their feet. Let's say that a person's foot, let's say the bottom of my hand is the bottom of my foot and the top of my hand is the top of a foot. And a person has an anatomical issue where their foot is completely turned, and the part of their foot that touches the ground is the top of their foot. That person is not eligible to do chalitza. He's not eligible to have chalitza done to him. That's the din of Ameimar over here. He says that lo chalitz. And Amar le Ravashi le Ameimar v'Tanya. Wait 1 second. We just said in our Mishnah, we have a person who's a total cripple. He's a double amputee. We said smuchos haraglaim, a person who has he's wearing a bag over his legs to protect his legs because he's using his hands to walk. Lav de chalitz, but it can't be that the person who walks on the top of his foot because his foot is so curved is worse than the guy who has no feet. Says Gemara lo. When we were talking about the cripple in the brisa, that wasn't the double amputee. That was the yoiv le'la'acher v'chalis. We're talking about him giving the leather bag that he wears to protect the stumps of his leg. That's what we're talking about. Him giving it to someone else, but not him wearing it. And yes, it's in fact the case that if a person's the rotation of the foot was so significant that he was walking on the top side of his foot, that person would not be eligible for chalitza. And Amar Ravashi, Lemaidik Amar Amemer, this din that he says that if your foot is so heavily rotated that you're walking on the top of your foot that it doesn't count, La bar uba chalitz, v'la bar kipuv chalitz. These are two people who had this disease, disorder, whatever it was, and they walked that way and it would not be kosher. That person is not eligible for chalitza. It's a real big problem because if a person's not eligible for chalitza and he's the only remaining brother, then the woman is trapped. So it's a very big problem. I don't know how we would solve that. If the only brother that was alive, Reuven was healthy, married to Rachel, Reuven died. The only brother left was Shimon, but Shimon, his whole foot is turned. He walks on lichta dekara, on the top of his foot because his foot is rotated. What's the woman supposed to do? She's stuck. It's a problem. Says the Gemara halfway down on Kuf Gimel Amud Aleph, and we're going to be learning about one more Amud. We'll be stopping about halfway down, which is good because Shachar says in about 10 minutes. And the Gemara speaks about the following din, Minu Arkuva Ulamata. The Mishnah spoke about this distinction about someone who's amputated below the leg, let's say mid calf versus mid thigh. It says the Gemara Minhu Raglayim when we were talking about the din, it's actually Regalim. We learned about this in another Masechta, the din that a person is eligible or not eligible for doing the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel depends on whether or not they have legs. Prat l'ba'alei kabin. People who need prosthetics are exempt from the mitzvah of aliyah l'regel. Says the Gemara, why over there are they exempt and why over here do they seem to count? Says the Gemara, shayni hacha d'chsiv me'al raglo. Fine. If that's true, that me'al raglo, that it should be that even above the knee, even if they were an amputee from above the knee, they should still be kosher. Me'al, below me'al de me'al. No, it says the Gemara, you can be above the foot, which means the calf, but you can't be above that which is above the foot. So therefore, if you still have part of the calf bone, fine, you're good to go. But if you don't have anything, have a calf bone, and all that you have left is a stump that's above the knee, and you have part of the thigh bone, so then you're not eligible for chalitza. Amar Papa Shmami, no, this teaches us, hi, istivira. This is the Aramaic word for an ankle. We treat the ankle as part of the foot bone. Because if we in fact did look at it as another anatomical part of the body, then the ankle would be above the foot. The shoka and the calf is me'al de me'al. And then even if you had an amputation below the knee but above the ankle, then you would be done for. You could not do chalitza. Amar Ravashi, afilu tema mifsak pasik. Even if you want to say that the ankle is a distinct part of the body, called the bahade kara kikara. That anything that's that close to the ground is considered close to the ground. Don't worry. And Ladina, the way the Gemara seems to conclude is that if a person was amputated above the ankle but below the knee, he's still eligible for chalitza. But above the knee, he's no longer eligible for chalitza. Next part, what about the thigh? The Gemara has a big problem with this because, as we'll see in about 5 or 6 different examples right now, we often refer to the thigh as regel. And regel is the word that we've been talking about, that maybe that should be the calf as well. Says the Gemara, Masi Rav Kahana, Uvishilya Sahayotses mi ben ragleha. When we speak about a woman giving birth, we say the shilya, the placenta that's delivered mi ben ragleha, between the legs. Which part of the leg are we talking about? Obviously, it's the thigh is close to the osamakam where baby is delivered from. So if that's true, we see that a thigh is regel. Says Gemara, that's not correct. When a woman actually delivers, she bends her knees in a way where she can deliver more easily, and therefore her legs are near her thighs, and therefore they're considered the same. Tashma, let's try again to understand how a thigh may or may not be like a regel. Lo asa ragla v'lo asa sifamo. This is a discussion by Mipi Boshes and Tanakh. Lo asa ragla, Rashi says, is a reference to pubic hair. That's obviously, why is that called ragla? That's closer to the thighs. We therefore see that a thigh is a regel. Maybe we should allow for chalitza if there's an amputee above the knee. Nope, lishna ma'alya. No, it's just a nicer way to talk. Instead of saying what it actually meant, which Rashi highlights, is lo heisir seir zakan tachton. So instead of saying that, it just says regel, but really it's not actually a regel. Regel is only defined as below the knee. Tashma, let's try again. This is a reference to urination. So why we see raglav is from closer to the thighs. That part of the body is closer to the thighs. The Gemara says the same thing again. Lishna ma'alya. The word raglav in this pasuk is only a cleaner way to speak. Tashma, ach meisichu raglav b'cheder hamekira. This is also a reference to urination b'cheder hamekira, in a cold room. Whatever the reference is, not for now. Lishna ma'alya. And then the Gemara says it was just lishna ma'alya to say raglav. Really, it isn't raglav. Raglav is not the thigh. The thigh is above the regel. And the Gemara says, Bein Ragleh, the story of Yael and Sisra, where where he was with her, and we'll see in the Gemara, he was with her many times intimately. And bein ragleha, obviously between the legs, that's what the Gemara says. Says Gemara, no lishna ma'alya, that doesn't literally mean ragleha. The thigh is still not the rega. And now let's talk about Yael and Sisra. Amar Rav Yochanan sheva be'ilos baal osa rasha be'osa ayom. Sisra was with Yael 7 times that day. Shneimar, and many of the words here are references to the Tashma Shemita bein ragleha kara nafal shacha bein ragleha kara nafal abasher kara sham nafal shadu. Fine, they were together 7 times. Ask the Gemara the great question, a question that's been asked about Yael, and a question that's been asked about Esther, and many others. If there's Hana in the Tashma Shamita, if she got Hana in the Tashma Shamita, that should be us, or it should be Harag Val Yavor. Tosfos clarifies what the actual question is. We don't have time, but it's a great sugya to look into. Amar Rav Yochanan Mishum Mishum Ben Yochai, that's not correct. She did not have Hana from the Tashma Shamita. Kolto Vasan Shel Rishayim, anything that might be good for a Rasha, turning to the top of Kuf Gimel Amid Beis, Ra he etzel tzadikim. For her, it was not considered anything good at all. It was considered ra. Top line, shenemar hishamer loch pen tedaber im Yaakov mitovad ra. Says the Gemara, bishlama ra. We understand that the ra part is not good for the tzadik lechaya. I understand that. Elatov amaylo. Why isn't it good? If it's good, it's good. If it's not good, it's not good. If she's with the Rasha, so if the Tashma Shamita has any hana, then it's a problem. Amalei shmami no tovasan shorshaim ra he etzel tzadikim. It wasn't good. By definition, it isn't good. If the person's a Rasha and the woman is a tzaddik, if Sisra's a Rasha, if Yael is a tzaddikas, so then the Tashma Shamita had no hana. It's just her, in her brain, it was a 0. It just needed to happen because it needed to happen to save the Jewish people, and she was praised for it. Says the Gemara, Bishlam Hasam, I could understand. And the pasuk that's quoted at the top of the page, the pasuk at the top of the page, at the top line that says Hishamar Lach Pentadaber, was talking about Lavan and Yaakov in their dialogue. There we understand that there might have been some conversations about Avodas Kochavim that we wouldn't have wanted to have. That's a spiritual issue. Elahacha, when it comes to Sisra and Yael, this isn't a spiritual issue. Tashma Shemita is a categorical blanket isser. The act is a blanket isser. So therefore, how could you say that the pasuk is the same thing? The pasuk is talking about Avodas Kochavim, and here we're talking about Tashma Shemita, but Avodas Kochavim is a spiritual issue, and this is not a spiritual issue. Says the Gemara, to Kashadi Bazuama, through the Tashma Shemita, he was shadi bazuama. He placed into her zuhama, some evil spirit of some kind. Rabbi Yochanan, similar to the story of the Maseches. The same as when the Nachash was with Chava, hitil bazuama. He placed some type of. We loosely would have called it venom, but this is a spiritual conversation here. It says the Gemara, how do we solve this problem of the venom? Yisrael shamdu al har Sinai paska zuamasan. Anyone who had zuama put into their bodies at the time of Har Sinai, that problem went away. So they still hold on to their zuama. Anyone who's done this avodas kochavim, and they don't have a Har Sinai to clean them up, they maintain their zuama. We're going to learn until the half of the page. Let's continue a little bit more. We're at the 2 dots, a quarter of the way down. What if I am wearing your shoe? And they try to do, and she tries to do chalitza. We have a brisa. What does the brisa say? Na'alo, his shoe. Na'alo, I only know if the shoe belongs to me, then it has to be my shoe. Na'al shel kol adam minayin. How do I know that another person's shoe works? Says the Gemara, Talmud Lomar, Na'al mikol makom. Because any shoe works. Says the Gemara, Im kain, Matam Lomar Na'alo. If any shoe works, then why does it say Na'alo with a vav at the end, implying the possessive that it actually belongs to him? Na'alo haroilo, the shoe has to fit him. Not conceptually, but literally, the shoe has to fit him. This is specifically says Gemara, it has to be to the exclusion of a shoe that is so big that you can't walk in it. You're wearing bozo shoes. You're wearing those fins. What are they called? The things that people fins. Water, yeah. Well, I can't remember what they're called right now. Too early in the morning. So if you're wearing shoes that you can't walk in, then those don't count. That's what Na'alo came to teach us. And if you're wearing a very small shoe that doesn't cover most of your foot, or uprat l'sandal ha'mesulaim, or we're talking about a broken shoe she'ein lo ekev, that has no heel. Okay. Abaye have a koi comment of Yosef. Abaye was in front of his Rebbe, Rav Yosef. Asa Yevama lachlot, and a Yevama and her Yavam showed up to do chalitza. Amar le, he says to Abaye, have le sandalach, give the man your shoe, because the shoe had to be a kosher shoe. Obviously, the guy didn't have a kosher shoe. Abaye gave him a shoe. Yoav le sandal the small, and he gave him his left shoe. Amar le, Amor to Amar Abonon the Avad. I understand you. If you want to give the left shoe to the Avad, I got it, no problem. Lechatchila miyamor. But who says that you can do that lechatchila? Amar le says back to him, Yihachi sandal she'ein shalom nami Amor to Amar Abonon the Avad lechatchila miyamor. But who says you can even give somebody else's shoe? It's my shoe. It's not his shoe. Says the Gemara, Amar le, hachi kamin alach, hav le ve'akni le. You're right, but you should give it to him and let him make a kinyan. He can't just take your shoe. It has to be made with a kinyan. Just a couple more lines and then we'll stop. Sandal shel eitz, if the sandal is made out of wood, mantana, Amar Shmuel, Reb Meir, he did not hakib akitea yotze bekapshel, Reb Meir, Reb Yossi oser, and ava avua de Shmuel omer b'mechupa or b'divrei hakol. It has to be that this is covered in leather because as we discussed, ve'en alacha tachash, it has to come from an animal. We're going to stop right here at Amar Rav Papi, and I will be pre-recording and posting for Sunday's shiur and for Monday's shiur. And Mir Hashem, we're back in person on Tuesday. Wishing you all a beautiful Shabbos.